The Fosi Audio SK01. Could this be the ultimate starter headphone amp? There's clearly a lot to cover here, so let's get started. At a glance, it's obvious that this little unit means business. The SK01's shell is made out of an aluminium alloy that is perfectly finished aside from a slightly sharper edge under the top plate overhang. But fortunately, it's not sharp enough to cut. I'm not a big fan of this design choice. It doesn't add anything for me from an aesthetic point of view, but does make it much easier to pick up and move around the desk, which is more important for a portable unit such as this. There are two wide rubber feet on the bottom, which is always a welcome addition, and all audio ports are tastefully finished with a gold-colored metal ring. The knobs are made of the same aluminium and have an identical finish as the rest of the body, and the pots have a heavy, slow and satisfying feel to them with no backlash or wobble. Unfortunately for some, the knob markers do not align perfectly in the zero position. For most people at this price point, this won't be a deal breaker, but now that I've pointed it out, you can't ignore it either. You're welcome. The buttons are all plastic and the switches feel a bit mushy and need to be pushed in completely before the mechanical switch is activated. I would have personally hoped that these switches were easier to adjust, but if you throw this in your backpack, it would also be annoying if the switches were activated during transport, changing your settings. So there's an argument to be made both ways. On the back is a Type-C USB power and charging port, 3.5mm line in and line out, although this has been mislabeled. This is technically not a line out, but the pre-out. All tone and volume adjustments will be applied through this so-called line out. And finally on the front are two headphone jacks, 3.5mm and 6.35mm. This might be the most feature-rich headphone amplifier under $100. It has treble, mid-range and bass tone controls, a tone defeat switch, a loudness switch, a gain switch for toggling between using headphones and more sensitive IEMs, and an internal battery with an advertised rating of 2,500 mAh or up to 6 hours continuous use. Let's start with the main event, tone controls. If you've seen my previous video review on the Fosi K5 Pro, you'll know that I got very excited to finally have an amp with good tone controls. However, the unit suffers a few drawbacks, including a lack of mid-range tone control, somewhat limited range of the tone control's frequency spread, and a slightly limited maximum adjustment of volume. The SK01 takes care of all those issues. Bass control gently bleeds into the lower mids up to around 800 Hz, which is actually better and more balanced than the K5 Pro, which reaches up to about 350 Hz, with a maximum adjustment of 12 decibels. The treble adjustment is the weakest of the three, but also provides a solid 9 decibels adjustment in either direction. The peak of the 10 decibel mid-range tone control is focused squarely around 1000 Hz, which is a fair place to add this control. There are very few headphones which feel weak or strong exactly in this area, but sometimes it's the sum of the tone control adjustments that work in combination that make a good correction. It's absolutely worth mentioning that it also gently bleeds all the way up into the treble and fizzles out around 40 Hz, which is pretty much all you could ever ask for to ensure a smooth transition between all tone adjustments. The gain switch toggles between a high gain mode with a very powerful output of 2,400 mW at 32 ohms and a low gain mode of 300 mW. I must say, I'm not aware of any other headphone amplifier under $100 with such a powerful output. It is powerful enough to comfortably drive almost any headphone I own, including large planars, but don't expect to drive hungry vintage headphones or your Hi-Fi Man HE6. The tone defeat switch toggles tone controls on and off, but it has no effect on the loudness button. If loudness is on, the tone defeat will not bypass it. The loudness button is a very welcome feature on any preamp. Anyone who's ever dabbled with vintage speaker amplifiers and receivers will be familiar with this button and what it does. In a nutshell, it gives an extra boost of bass and treble of approximately 30% with exactly the same tone controls that's provided by the knobs. Normally, there's no reason to use this for headphones, but it works for headphones just as well as it does for loudspeakers. The purpose of the loudness button is for more normal, low volume listening. The reason being that on low volumes, our hearing perception of very low and high frequencies is reduced. So, if for example you're having guests over and you want to add some quiet background music, just hit the loudness button and the music will immediately sound bigger, fuller, and more detailed. This also works for very low volume headphone listening. Both the 3.5mm and 6.35mm ports can be used simultaneously, which can be a useful feature if you need to share the output with another. For example, cooperative music production or quietly watching a movie with someone. I wouldn't recommend it for making headphone comparisons, as you cannot adjust the volume of each individual port, so different headphones with different sensitivities will have different volumes. The line out is a pre-out. So this one feature that I feel is good but limited, or rather could have been expanded on, is the so-called line out to my speaker amp. But the problem I faced is that I have a 2.1 speaker system with a powered sub. Using the pre-out from the speaker amp to feed the sub is just below my preferred volume on the subwoofer, despite the sub being on full volume. What my subwoofer needs is a separate, strong, and proper line-out signal, but the only thing I can get from the SK01 is the weaker pre-out with its volume or tone corrections applied to the signal. My only option, therefore, is to look for a different DAC or another preamp with an extra undiluted line out on top of the pre-out. As amps go, there's no audible or measurable effect on the headphones I tested, so in that regard, it is linear and imparts no particular tonal flavor of its own on the sound, but I get the feeling there is just a slight lack of control over the headphone diaphragm. Compared with my Audio GED NFB 11.28TXCO, I get the feeling that some bass notes and string plucks on the double bass, for example, might not have as much texture, which gives the slight impression of a lack of dynamics, but it's so subtle it might as well be placebo. So what's the catch? In such a feature-rich, powerful, and well-designed device, there has to be something wrong with it at this price, right? In all my testing, I found only one standout issue. With more sensitive IEMs and dynamic headphones, there is audible background hissing on higher volumes. In all my normal testing and listening, this hissing was never present or audible, but it is clearly there when the volume is cranked up while no audio is being played. So the catch is that you're not getting a perfectly black background. However, with my large planars and other insensitive or higher ohm headphones like the Sennheiser HD650 and Hi-Fi Man HE500, there was practically no audible hissing at any volume. On low gain mode, the problem is reduced but not entirely mitigated. So for audio production, I would not recommend using this with sensitive headphones like the Sony MDR CD900ST or the JVC HAMX100Z. It's better if you lean more towards a biodynamic DT880 600 ohm or the AKG K612 Pro. For anyone starting out with headphones or audio production, this is almost a complete no-brainer. Just couple it with any stereo DAC and you're in business. Practically whatever modern headphone you throw at it will be driven properly with the added flexibility of tone control. It's a unit that I'm more than comfortable adding to my existing system and can easily recommend beginners building their system around it too. Obviously, purists will find the SK01 a huge turnoff, the contamination to the audio signal caused by tone corrections and potential background hissing on higher volumes is a purist audiophile's nightmare. But for anyone looking for a bit of extra spice, this has got the flavor. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.